Ray Home Alone is the 18th episode of the 3rd season of Everybody Loves Raymond. This is directed by Steve Zuckerman, and as always there will be spoilers from now as I go through the events in the episode and share some thoughts. To be honest, it's pretty slow for a lot of it, but the last couple of scenes are really brilliant, so it is slow, but there are definitely some good moments. It is unfortunately another episode where Debra is not around a lot, but she is in the opening scene where Ray and Debra are in bed. Ray is keeping a bruise journal because he keeps wondering why he has all of these bruises. Seems like a pretty sensible thing to do, actually. And we also establish that Debra is going away for the weekend with the kids to see her parents. And Ray is obviously going to be home alone. We then cut to the next night. And the guys are over, everybody's talking, they start to talk about crying, and they realise it's getting late, it's time to leave. Ray is on his own. And he doesn't want to be on his own because obviously he's never really spent a night on his own. He probably has occasionally, but it's not something that happens that often. So he's kind of apprehensive about this, and I understand where he's coming from. It's a bizarre situation where if you're on your own every night for a long period of time, it just feels normal and it's not that scary. But if you've been living with somebody for a while and then you're on your own for one night, that seems really scary for some reason. So I understand where he's coming from. He ends up going over to Robert's. Robert has a date over, and the date does end up leaving, but it is after midnight, so it's not necessarily Raymond's fault that she left. But at the same time, Robert is definitely blaming Raymond. Raymond doesn't want to admit that he's scared, but Robert points this out. Ray then tells Robert, well, you used to be scared of your shoe tree, and it goes back and forth a little bit. Ray ultimately ends up leaving and goes home, and this is really the first moment in the episode that I really enjoyed, when Ray is getting ready for bed and we hear this noise, and it was genuinely scary, and it turns out it's Ali's toy. Ali's toy was introduced in the opening scene. It's one of those really irritating toys where the child speaks to it, it then speaks it back, it records whatever the child had just said in a very terrifying voice, and it genuinely gave me just a teeny tiny jump scare. It was really effectively done. Ray cannot cope. He goes over to Marie's, and Marie happens to be up making tea for Robert. It turns out that what Ray had said about the shoe tree in the previous scenes, or in the earlier scene, was enough to scare Robert into going over to his parents under the guise that they're fumigating his apartment and he can't go home straight away. Marie is actually really sweet. She comforts them. She gives this little talk about how it's okay to be scared sometime. Yes, obviously that's for the benefit of Ray and Robert, but I feel like that's really beneficial for the viewer as well, because we all get scared. I know there are some people who claim they're not scared of anything, but I don't agree with that. And it was a nice little speech. And then here's Frank, who absolutely terrified everybody by giving us another little jump scare, and his facial expressions, his grinning, just absolutely delightful. And then we have a bit of a heart-to-heart between the brothers as they talk about things they were scared of and how they should have been there for each other rather than giving Frank the fuel he needed to scare them. And there was a moment that I genuinely found very funny. A couple of moments, but one in particular where Ray admitted that Robert didn't used to wet the bed. Ray used to pour water on the bed, and Marie just said, I used to wonder why it was up by your shoulders, which I thought was very funny. And Marie and Frank go off to bed. Ray and Robert are going over to Ray's house. Robert's going to sleep on the sofa, and they decide to get Frank back for all of the times he scared them as children. So they sneak upstairs and hide in the closet in Marie and Frank's room. And I thought it was obvious what was happening, but at the same time I still found it entertaining, because we hear Frank saying, you know what we haven't done in a while. And then he starts to make noises that definitely make it seem like he's having sex with Marie. Presumably with Marie. And Ray and Robert obviously don't want to listen to this, so they come out the room with their eyes shielded, and it's just Frank standing there. He scared them again. And I thought it was very funny. And I like the fact that he knew they were there and took the opportunity to scare them one more time. And Ray and Robert obviously leave, and we then cut to Debra being back. They're back in the bedroom. Ray and Debra are in bed, and Debra's looking through Ray's bruise journal. And this is how we end the episode, and I thought it was very, very funny. She reads from the journal, Robert's elbow in my rib in Mum and Dad's closet. With no context, goodness knows what Debra thought they were up to. And I thought it was a really funny way to end things. So definitely quite a slow episode to begin with, but it does pick up. Personal highlights would be, I think, well, the jump scare with Ali's toy, Frank giving us a bit of a jump scare when he popped his head through the wall, and just the way the whole closet thing played out. And then my absolute favourite is Debra reading the bruise journal at the end. I thought that was pretty good. So not a favourite episode. But that being said, it's still pretty good. I think it touches on some pretty interesting topics, raises some interesting points, definitely could provide some people with some comfort. And ultimately, Ray Home Alone is not a bad episode.